でも諦めない木箱拳に握りしめてこの運命と明日の記憶いつ砕いて守るよ
Mimiko and Kotaro headed to the compromiser's main offices, passing a few people that Mimiko knew on the way. She waved every time, but did not stop. The very idea that Hibari thought her dead and was probably spreading rumors about it was a far more pressing matter on her mind than anything else. She was gratified by the look on Hibari's face when she opened the door to the compromiser's offices.
Mimiko?
Hibari stared in shock as her fellow compromiser entered the room.
Is that really you, Mimiko?
The brunette found herself suddenly rushed by Hibari and a few others, who grabbed her up into a big group hug.
I was beginning to think you were dead. Where were you?
Mimiko suffered the ministrations of her erstwhile companions for about 30 seconds before she was trying to break free so that she could breathe.
Hey, you guys, ow!
With her exclamations, the majority of her co-workers let go, though Hibari hung on like she'd never see her again.
I was so worried.
Kotaro tried to insert himself between the two compromisers.
Hey, Mimi doesn't like that.
Hibari gave one last squeeze before she let go.
Why didn't you call? You could have at least said something.
Mimiko blushed fiercely.
I had a lot going on. They made me stay in bed for at least half a week.
Hibari paused in her jabbering questions, a thoughtful expression on her face.
Oh yeah.
She dived for her desk, pulling out a rather large vase filled with flowers and plunked it down in front of her senior.
These are from everyone.
She looked rather pleased with herself. Kotaro immediately knelt down in front of the vast arrangement, admiring the various blooms.
Wow, Mimi, look! It's huge!
His brilliant eyes were large as he gazed at the flowers. Mimiko felt like she was in shock. She certainly hadn't expected anything like this and wasn't sure how to respond.
Hibari, I don't know what to say.
Hibari smiled at her.
You big goof. Just say thank you.
Mimiko hobbled a few steps to her friend and gave her a big hug in return.
Thank you, everyone. Really.
Jiro sat, his expression unfathomable as he tried to digest what the chief had just told him.
Are you certain? Absolutely certain about this?
Janai leaned back against his desk with a sigh.
Absolutely. Though I wish I wasn't. But there's no mistake. The clues are far too obvious. Everything adds up to this point. There are only two questions still unanswered. Who and why? Though I have my suspicions on the first.
Jiro's eyes hardened.
Who then? I know you've kept things from me out of a desire to protect Mimiko, but if you want me to do my job, I need to know everything.
Shogo's entire body appeared to take on 10 years as Jiro watched. Every line screamed of how tired this man was and had been for some time. The weight of responsibility was definitely double on his shoulders.
In the past, we had encounters with certain vampires, especially during the critical years between the completion of the current special zone and the end of its previous incarnation. You wouldn't know because you disappeared for those 10-odd years.
Jiro felt a bit of a stab at that comment. His disappearance had been necessary for the sake of his brother. All the same, it was a bit of a blow, even though he knew it was not necessarily meant to be one. He and Janai had discussed it before.
But
Janai's tone caught Jiro back from his reverie.
we were always able to keep them at bay.
He pushed away from his desk to move closer to his visitor.
Unfortunately, there are vampires out there, as I'm sure you are aware, who do not believe our two species should get along. To them, humans are merely food, and our attempts to try and bring us together were seen as a threat to them. As a result, they would occasionally attack us as we tried to build the city. We lost quite a few good people because of them.
Jiro's eyes remained hard, but he softened his expression, understanding where this man was coming from.
I'm sorry to hear it. Were any of the other culprits ever caught?
A few. But they would never talk. Most of them ended up committing suicide in one way or another. In the end, all we ever learned was that there were extremists following the orders of someone much older than they. So I feel it's safe to assume that there is someone more than 50 years old behind this as well. It's possible that he or she may even be an old blood. Though why Mimiko seems to be the only target is beyond me.
Jiro leaned his chin on one hand, thinking.
It certainly doesn't make much sense. Unless you go for the fact that she's a compromiser with the company, and since they obviously don't like the company. But then, that still doesn't make sense because no one else seems to be targeted. So why Mimiko?
He crossed one leg over the other.
This is most troublesome.
Mimiko headed for the door. She felt like she'd been swung around by just about every person in the department and was more than ready to go back home to some peace and quiet for just one more afternoon before she rejoined their ranks. Kotaro strained under the weight of the flower-filled vase. His little arms barely managed to reach around the clear glass. He tottered as he carried it.
Hey, Kotaro,
Mimiko stopped mid-hobble.
are you sure you can handle that?
Kotaro wavered to one side, stepping quickly to keep from falling over.
No problem. I got it.
He managed to regain his balance and set the vase down for a moment to wipe his brow.
Phew.
Mimiko turned to check on him.
I can always ask one of the girls to carry that for you.
She had one in mind already, Hibari, the blabmouth. It would serve her right. After all, she'd had to listen to her go on about how bad an influence the Silverblade was on her, how she should play some manipulation games with him to get him jealous. It was all pointless blather and had given her a bit of a headache.
Excuse me,
A young man tried to get Mimiko's attention by flapping his clipboard with one hand.
miss?
Mimiko turned to look questioningly at the young man dressed in a delivery uniform. She noticed that he was carrying a box that stood about 1.5 feet tall and about 1 foot wide.
Yes?
The delivery boy looked at his clipboard.
I'm looking for a Mimiko Katsuragi. Do you know her?
Compromiser blinked in surprise.
That's me.
He handed her the clipboard.
Sign here, please.
He pointed to a blank line. She took the clipboard and awkwardly balanced it on her crutch as she signed, then handed the paperwork back. She had to scoot back a step as he thrust the box at her. Kotaro left the large vase on the floor as he came over to investigate.
Hey, Mimi. Who's it from?
Mimiko blinked and looked for a card but couldn't find any.
I have absolutely no idea.
She walked over to the nearest table so that she could set the box down and open it.
What is it?
He jumped up and down to try and see inside as she fumbled with the flap.
Open it! Open it!
Mimiko laughed at his enthusiasm.
I'm trying.
The small segment of cardboard came free from the slot and the side came open. Both vampire and human looked inside. Jiro sat up suddenly, his back ramrod straight. Junai watched in surprise.
Jiro, what is it?
He went to reach a hand towards the vampire. Jiro stood too quickly, his face a study of emotions.
Kotaro!
Before Junai knew what was happening, Jiro was out the door, flying toward the compromiser's offices. Junai immediately knew something must be wrong. He followed after the black blood as fast as he could.
Kichi, call in the suppression team now.
He didn't pause to see if his orders were followed, but tried to catch up with Jiro.